and get started. Um, so good morning. My name is James Britto, and I am your certified trainer for the residential purchase agreement, which was released in December of 2021. Some of you may have taken this class before, so I appreciate you coming back again. I want to let you know that the majority of what we're going to go over today, so that it doesn't last for hours and hours, are the first 3 pages, which are your negotiated terms within the big black grid or box that you'll see as we go through this. The remaining pages are pretty much unchanged. They may be in a different place within our contract, which is now 16 pages. If you have any questions about that, feel free to go ahead and save those for the end of the presentation, or go ahead and put them in the chat box, and staff can help for me to gather those questions. I can get them back to you. But the majority of what we'll spend our time on today is the first 3 pages, which are the negotiated terms, which is the most significant changes to the contract. Again, the other changes are maybe in different places, but the terms themselves are pretty much the same. And hopefully you'll have time to familiarize yourself with that if you haven't already. Okay. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box, or staff can help me if you want to raise your hand, and we can go ahead and take some questions after each page. All right. So hopefully you can all see my screen share here, which is the first page of our new residential purchase agreement or contract, or however you want to call it. Its acronym is RPA. And so you'll see at the top here, some of the information that looks different, again, is going to be standard. The date you're preparing your contract, who your offer is from, the property that you are writing your offer on. And then you'll notice there that your assessor's parcel number. Gee, I got to slow down. Has a much longer line there, and that's because of SB 9 for the lot splits. So in case you need to put multiple APNs in there, you now have the space to do so. All right. Section 2 is your agency section. So again, all these fields are fillable. You're going to be able to put in the seller's brokerage name and the brokerage license number, then the agent's name and their license, and the same for the buyer's brokerage firm and the buyer's agent. And of course, if you're doing a dual agency, then you can check that box and you only need to fill out the one section. And if for some reason you have more than one brokerage represented in your transaction, you can go ahead and check 2C right there. And what that's going to do is that's going to automatically bring the additional broker acknowledgement form, ABA, into your transaction. So sometimes when you check these boxes, it's going to go ahead and bring that form in for you. You don't have to go and manually go and find it. And that way, if you're not sure which form, it's going to bring it in there for you. So of course, for potentially competing buyers and sellers, which is almost every single transaction, you're going to have the PRBS form. It's automatically part of your template. So the box is just checked there, as you can see in section D already for you. You can't uncheck it. It's there. All right. So now in section 3, we're going to be moving into our negotiated terms section. These are the contractual terms. It reminds everybody who is reading the contract and signing it that the entire contract is 16 pages. And again, it encourages everybody to read all 16 pages. And I'm going to say this, everyone has heard it before, I'm sure, but in the era of DocuSign and DigiSign and digital ink, whatever else you may use, a lot of times we are showing our clients where to initial and sign, and they are clicking and they are not reading. So you are strongly advised to go over your contract with your clients, even if they're going to be digitally signing. Luckily, with Zoom or Teams or whatever you use, if you can't meet with them in person, which we're mostly meeting in person again now, but if for some reason you can't, you can use those technologies to go over this contract and make sure that you have advised them of everything. There are no questions before they digitally sign. Okay, because we're going to see some issues with that. CAR is very well aware and is advising us that we're going to see a lot of lawsuits in the future from people when the market changes eventually, who don't realize what they signed. They just clicked, and we advised them to click, and we dropped and dragged where they should sign and where they should initial, and we didn't go over this with them. So I really strongly encourage you to share that with your peers and agents in your office and anyone else who's writing a contract. They really need to go over this contract before their clients sign it in ink or in digitally. In our box here, let's go ahead and go through each section, each line, I should say. So the great thing about this new contract is it's going to reference what paragraph elsewhere in the contract you can find more information about this specific line item. So for example, right there on A, we're going to talk about the purchase price that you're going to offer in your contract. You can find more information about that in paragraph 5 of our contract here. So we're going to go down to other pages, and you'll see in paragraph 5, it'll have more information about your purchase price, terms and conditions, etc. All right, so right there on line A, you're going to be able to fill in your purchase price. And then next to that, you have additional terms. It makes it more clear up front instead of digging through the contract in other places where you can find the ancillary terms of your offer. So of course, we know that most of our contracts are finance purchase contracts. However, there are some that are all cash, and you're going to be able to highlight that right there by checking that box. So immediately as they look at page 1 and go, okay, let's see what this price is at 500,000, they're going to see that it's all cash. Okay, so it puts that right up front. In section B, your close of escrow. So it's going to be however many days after acceptance, not after the day you write it, but after it's accepted. Or if you have a specific date that you need to close, then you would enter it there. Pick one or the other. All right. And then the expiration of your offer. So again, you'll see that you can find more information on the expiration of your offer in paragraph 32A. And then it gives you some standard language or a place for you to change that. So you could have the standard, which is your offer expires 3 calendar days after all buyer signatures, or your offer expires on whatever date at 5 p.m. or at whatever p.m. And I'm sharing the story recently that last year I had someone who gave me 45 minutes to have my buyers accept their counteroffer. And I didn't pay attention. So in the end, it worked out, but for a day or two, I was upset and my buyers were crestfallen. So really make sure that you pay attention to that. That's why it's up in the front now too, not buried somewhere else. So Part D. First part of Part D is your initial deposit or your earnest money deposit. And I'm not going to do this every time, but you can see your paragraph numbers there that you can reference. So you're going to put in however your initial deposit amount is. Or if you wanted to calculate, you can put in the percentage amount of your purchase price there, okay? But that's to calculate based off your sales price. It's not a contractual term. So when it calculates $10,000 based on a $500,000 purchase price and 2%. If you change your purchase price to $550 later, your deposit amount doesn't automatically increase. You need to put that in your terms that you're changing. So that percentage is just going to calculate it, but it is not contractually enforceable. The dollar amount is. So that's just for you to calculate it. I encourage you just pick your dollar amounts and try not to rely on that percentage calculation tool there. And for your initial deposit amount, on the right there, it tells you how quickly you're going to deposit that initial deposit. The standard is 3 business days. You can make it longer or shorter. After acceptance, and the new standard is by wire transfer. And we know in the post-COVID era that the wire transfer seems to be the new way that most of our title companies are accepting the deposits. However, if there's an alternative method that your client is going to try to use in submitting their offer, they can go ahead and you can check the box and you can fill in the way that they'd prefer to do it. D2, if you're going to do an increased deposit. I know we don't see this all the time, but perhaps we may as the market continues to get more aggressive to make your offer stronger, that if you accept my offer, 7 days later, I'll give you even more of a deposit. So again, you're just going to go ahead and put in your dollar amount there. And then on the right, you're going to decide when that increased deposit is going to be deposited. The standard default is going to be upon the removal of all of your contingencies. Perhaps you just want to do it on a certain date, or perhaps you want to do it after you've removed your inspection contingency. You have those options to check the box and fill in the blanks there, whatever is best. What it's also going to do is, excuse me, when you check this box right there for increased deposit, it's going to insert the form DID into your transaction. So you'll have that, okay? Line item E, your loan amount. So you're going to have your first loan, and there's your line to put in a dollar amount, or if you want to use the percentage to calculate. Again, it's just for calculation purposes. If you change your price later, you're going to make sure that you need to change your loan amounts in any addendum or modifications of your terms. All right, and then your interest rate. So it's going to assume a standard of the fixed rate loan. If you're doing an initial adjustable rate, then you're going to check that box. And then you're going to put in your percentage amount, whether it's fixed or adjustable. If there's points, you can fill that in on the next line. And then your 17 for your, if you're FHA or a VA buyer, the delivery of the list of lender required repairs, the standard there is for 17 days after acceptance. You could make that longer or shorter if that is part of your negotiation. And then on the right of that, you're going to designate what kind of loan. Really important to be clear here. The standard default, again, is conventional. If you're going to be an FHA or a VA, you would go ahead and check one of those boxes. It's going to bring those FVAC and HID forms into your transaction for you. We're probably going to see a return of seller financing as the equity increases and it gets more tough. Or if there's some other kind of financing you're using, you can check the box and fill in the blank there. And if you're using additional financing, backup financing, whatever you're going to use, you'd fill in the same information under E2, okay? And maybe you're using a loan for the first part, and maybe you're asking the seller to carry back 10%. So you have your options there. For those of you who aren't familiar with seller financing, please talk with your managers and brokers. And Ro, that's probably something we should put on our education calendar, is for someone to give us a presentation on seller financing, because again, I really think that's going to be coming back. Section E3 is your occupancy type. So it's going to assume that your contract is for the primary residence, an owner occupant. However, if it's going to be a secondary home or an investment home, you can check that box as well. Important for the lenders when they get the contract. After you filled in all these terms, it's going to calculate the balance of your down payment based on your initial deposit, your loan amount, and then it's going to restate your purchase price total there. Of course, as on each page, everyone's going to initial on the bottom. Okay, so we've completed page 1. Do we have any questions? I don't see any. I'm not hearing from staff, so that's great. All right. And I don't see anything in the chat. Okay. So we're going to move on to page 2. Again, you can see here we're still inside our contractual term box. G1 is if you're requesting a seller credit, if any, for the buyer. You're going to go ahead and you're going to put in a dollar amount. If you want to ask for 2% closing cost credit from the seller, again, you can put in the 2 to calculate. But if your purchase price changes, that's not going to automatically change. So keep that in mind. And then on the right, the seller credit is to be applied to closing costs, or if you want it applied to something else, you can check that box and try to negotiate that. And then G2 are your additional finance terms, and it gives you the lines to go ahead and insert those. And with these fillable lines here, such as G2, it gives you a pretty generous amount of space for you to write in your additional finance terms. That being said, if you run out of space, it's automatically going to pull up an addendum called text overflow, addendum, TOA, and it's going to go ahead and bring your extra text into the addendums. And if you overfill multiple lines, it's going to go ahead and have all your information there on the text overflow addendum so that you can see all your overflows in one place and assign that addendum. Okay. All right. H, your verification of an all cash offer, making sure you have sufficient funds to close. So again, if you're an all cash offer, you're going to go ahead and hopefully send proof of your bank statement or brokerage account or whatever you've got that you can pay the entire purchase. You're going to, the standard believes you're going to attach that to the offer. If for some reason you don't have that immediately available and you're going to provide that after acceptance, then you would check the box, and that default would be within 3 days after acceptance, or you could make it quicker or longer by filling in that blank. H2, if you're not an all cash offer, then that's the verification of your down payment and closing cost funds. Same thing, hopefully you can attach that statement with your offer, or if not, you check the box. And H3 is the verification of your loan application. So again, most of us like to see that attached to our offer. However, there are those who don't have time to get an updated copy, whatever, and need to submit it later. And they're going to cross their fingers that that still gets their offer accepted. You check the box how quickly you're going to deliver your verification they've applied for a loan. And then on the right, you're going to tell them what kind of where you are in the process for the loan application. Are they pre-qualified, or are they pre-approved, or are they fully underwritten in their pre-approval? So we know each one of them is different, and that can definitely affect what a seller is willing to accept in financed offers. So make sure that you are aware of the differences too, and if you're not, talk with your lender about what the differences are with those 3 different categories. All right. Let's see, we're moving on to line item J, and that's your final verification of condition, or sometimes we call it your final walkthrough. And that is standard at 5 days before your close of escrow. You can make that longer or shorter depending on your needs and what the seller is willing to negotiate or agree to. K is your assignment request. If you plan on potentially assigning this to someone else, so you're writing the contract in someone's name, but you know that there's a good chance that you may need to assign it to another party. So the husband's out of town and can't sign it right now because he's in another country. So the wife writes it in her name, but you're going to be assigning it to both of them and adding him later. Or it may need to be, and you're not sure yet due to financing, if you have to put grandma or grandpa or mom or dad or someone else into that contract instead. It provides for how many days after acceptance, okay? So you've got your standard there at 17 days after acceptance, or you can try to negotiate a different number by filling in the blank. Section L starts our contingencies. There are multiple contingencies in the contract. So we're going to go ahead and start with the first one, L1, which is our loan contingency. And then the timeline. So all the timelines have been changed to a standard default of 17 days here, okay? Too hard to have so many different 17, 12, 14, 10. So the default is 17. You, of course, can shorten them or lengthen them if you need to for your client. And you could fill in that number there. If you have no loan contingency with your initial offer, you can go ahead and check that box there. All right. Same goes for line L2 with your appraisal. So your appraisal contingency could be based on an appraised value at a minimum of purchase price, or you could fill in a dollar amount. Okay. So if you need to be more aggressive in your offers for your clients, you can go ahead and pick a contingency based on a certain price. Again, the standard default is the 17 days. If you're going to remove your appraisal contingency with your initial offer, you would check that box. However, for the FHA and the VA buyers, removing that appraisal contingency with your initial offer doesn't eliminate their right to cancel later due to the appraisal. Just the FHA and the VA don't provide for us to do that. So keep that in mind. Make sure your clients understand that even though they may want to go ahead and remove that, the sellers are going to be advised by their agents that it doesn't automatically eliminate the cancellation right. L3, for your inspections, 17 days for you to do investigations on your property, or a different number of days. And there's also for informational access to the property. And so that's the right to access the property for informational purposes only, but it's not a contingency and it doesn't create cancellation rights for the buyer. Okay. So the difference between your investigation and your informational access. So L4, reviewing the seller documents. So it's 17 days after acceptance or 5 days after receipt, whichever is later. So if they are lagging, then it would just be 5 days after the receipt, but I'm hoping you're not waiting as buyer's agents that long. So preliminary title report, again, all of these are going to be at the standard of 17 days or 5 days after receipt, whichever is later. And if they're in a common interest, those disclosures. And for a review of leased or liened items, such as for solar panels or propane tanks or, God forbid, PACE or HERO liens. Okay. And then if you look on the box on the right, removal or waiver of the contingency. So any contingency in lines L1 through L7 can be removed or waived by checking the applicable box or by attaching your contingency removal form and then checking the applicable boxes on that contingency removal form. Of course, removal or waiver of contingencies at the time of your offer is against the agent advice. So even though you may tell your clients, hey, this is what's going on in the market, this is what people are doing, this is something you might consider, I hope none of you are telling your clients to do it. I hope you're letting them make that to be their decision if they want to do it. And again, if you want to attach the full contingency removal form, you can go ahead and check that box there that says CR attached. And it's going to bring that form into your transaction, and then you can check the appropriate boxes on that form for what contingencies you want to remove or leave in place. Since that puts your buyer's deposit in jeopardy, I really hope you go over those terms very carefully with your clients. And then L8 is a contingency if you have one for the sale of the buyer's property. So the sale of the buyer's property is not a contingency unless you check the box here. When you check that box right there next to CAR form COP, it's going to bring that form into your transaction. You need to fill that out accordingly. We're doing on time. Okay. Okay, section M, that talks about the timelines for your performance on possession. So M1, when you're going to take possession of the property, the standard now, thankfully, is upon the notice of recordation. So I know we sometimes had people fill in the box, they wanted it at 12 p.m. and if we didn't record till 2, they were trying to get in there before we had confirmation that they were the new owners. So the standard is upon notice of recordation, or you can check the box at 6 p.m. Sometimes people need a little more time, or you can go ahead and try to pick your day or time, your time on the date specified. Okay. If it's a seller occupied or vacant unit, generally the time for delivery is the close of escrow date. Or if you're going to have different terms, such as for rent backs, you would check the appropriate box there. Okay, so if it's however many days after close of escrow, that's 29 or fewer, or 30 or longer, you're going to use different forms. So SIP, which is seller in possession, is going to go ahead and attach itself to your contract if you check the box for however many days, 29 or fewer. And then if it's going to be 30 or more days, you're going to check that box, and it's going to bring in the form RLAS, and that's your residential lease form for people who are going to be staying there 30 days or longer after closing. So I know sometimes we say, oh, they're going to rent back for 30 days. You really should be for 29 days. It's going to be 30 or more. It's going to change the form, and it changes really the kind of tenancy that you're giving the sellers after the close of the transaction. So take a look at each of those forms as well, your SIP and your RLAS, make sure you're familiar with them so that you can advise your buyers and your sellers of what the implications are for those. And then M3 is if you have a tenant occupied unit. Okay, and if that box is checked, then we're going to go ahead and have a tenant occupied property addendum form come into your transaction. You can go ahead and fill that out, and sellers agent, you can review how that's filled out. With investment properties, that's a standard. Section N, this is for the documents and costs and complying. So N1 is the timeline for the seller's delivery of documents. So the standard is that you need to receive those within 7 days after acceptance. If you're doing a 7-day closing, you may want those before 7 days, so you would fill in a shorter amount, like 2. N2 is to sign and return the escrow holder's general provisions and supplemental instructions. They've got that standard at 5 days after receipt. N3 is the time to pay the fees for ordering the HOA documents. They take so long now, you really shouldn't delay. So the contract provides for 3 days after acceptance. If you want to do it quicker, great. If you need longer, you're going to write that in and cross your fingers. N4, that is for installing smoke alarms, carbon monoxide detectors, and water heater straps. Excuse me for a second. And the standard for that is to have all those installed within 7 days after acceptance. If you're going to be doing a quick transaction or a rush appraisal, you're going to definitely want to make sure that you shorten that timeline so that those are all taken care of before your appraiser gets there. Otherwise, your buyers are going to probably have to pay a reinspection fee to come back. It's wasted money. All right, so that's the end of page 2. We'll stop for a second here. And do we have any questions about page 2?
Yes, it looks like Kemi has a question. Kemi, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask James your question?
Yes, I was wondering, I had a client who the seller didn't leave on time on the close of escrow. And that you won't know. How do we put that into the contract so that he doesn't leave and get paid and my buyer is still wondering where he's going to sleep for 2-3 days?
Well, I'm sure everyone's going to have a different opinion on this. My suggestion is I don't like to do my final walkthrough until about 2 days before.
Okay.
And that way you can kind of see, do you really feel that they're going to get out in time or not? And if you have strong concerns, that's the time you can either negotiate to halt the closing and delay it, or
Okay.
to have some money held back until they deliver the possession of the property.
Okay.
Okay, so that's my suggestion. You're right, it is very difficult when they're not out yet and they call you and tell you you're on record. What do you do at that point?
Yeah.
It is very difficult.
That's what happened to me, because immediately he said, oh, I'm going to be out the moment this. And the other agent is telling me, well, we don't have the recordation yet. So, and then immediately, everything got finished at 12 o'clock that day. And here I come in, the seller is like, he's never even tried to move a box. So it took like 3 days. So what I had to do was like, no, my buyers are moving in, you're moving out. And then we kind of had to walk it, but it took 4 days for my buyers to settle down. And I learned a big lesson. So that's why I'm asking, what do I do so that I don't ever have to go through that? And I
Yeah.
didn't ask for any money in escrow for him. So he just stayed there,
For my clients who are doing a seller in possession, they're going to stay for a week or
Okay.
whatever. Most of the time now you see that they're holding back a deposit from the sellers until they deliver possession. And
Okay,
so that's something that I would definitely negotiate, or I would hold my closing, say we're not going to close until we have some kind of agreement about what we're going to do if they're not out on time.
okay.
All
So
right.
my last question would be like, if I've already have another contract that even though the house looks empty, should I just make sure I do that before the close, or can I, because the contract is already in, how do I handle that now?
You can always stop the closing.
Oh, okay,
Absolutely. You and your client say, we're going to stop this closing until we negotiate what's going to happen. And I always like to check again within a couple of days, even if the house was empty. God
yeah,
forbid a squatter moved in. Now, what are you going to do? It was empty for 31 days, and now on day 32, it's
okay,
not empty anymore, and we're supposed to close tomorrow. So
okay,
definitely keep an eye on the properties for sure.
okay.
Okay. All
All right.
right.
Thank
Any
you.
other? Of course. Any other questions?
Can I ask one more? If nobody else, but it's okay. I'll wait if there's anybody else. It was just the L3 and L2 that I didn't understand how to. Yeah,
Okay.
investigation of property, and you did L3 and L2. That was when I have another question.
Okay.
It's like, if the contract says 17, the explanation is, or 5 days something. There was one where they said 5 days. How do we undo that?
Okay. So that would be like L4 through L7.
Yes.
Okay. So that is mostly for your documents.
Oh,
So that's the receipt of the documents. So you should have received seller documents or your preliminary title report or your common interest development disclosures or your list of leased or liened items. You should receive that within 17 days after acceptance,
okay.
or a different number, or 5 days after you're in receipt of those. That's when the contingency is going to expire.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. So 5 days after, that
You
makes
rec-
1 days.
So either 17 days after you accept the offer or 5 days after you receive those documents, whichever is later. That's when that contingency would expire.
Okay.
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 All right. I apologize to everyone else if I didn't explain that clearly the first time. So, okay, let's go ahead and move on to page 3 if we don't see any other questions.
I'm just going to answer Veronica's question. Yes, Veronica, we'll send you a copy of the recording. We did record this today's session.
Yes, we did. All right, thank you. Thank you, staff. Okay, so here we are. We're moving on to page 3, section P. So this talks about what is included and excluded in the purchase of the property. So we've got section P1. This is going to talk about all the items that are included, and all the items specified in paragraph 9B are included, and the following if the boxes are checked. Okay, so you've got your stove, fridge, wine fridge, all these appliances. Now we've got our video doorbells and security camera equipment and systems and smart home systems and your brackets for your video and audio. And you see right there, automatically checked and not able to be unchecked are bathroom mirrors. You've got your car charging and any huge potted trees or shrubs. And when I first saw the contract, I kind of had to laugh because I thought, who's taking bathroom mirrors? And then someone in my office had a contract where they went into contract and everything, and all of a sudden, after the seller starts moving out, the bathroom mirrors disappeared. And she said, well, they're mine. And we had a long discussion about that, and it became very contentious about these bathroom mirrors. And I just found it ironic that it must have been a bigger issue than I had imagined, because CAR has it in here as an automatic checked box. So if there are other items that you would like to include in the sale that are not listed there or in paragraph 9B, you can go ahead and fill those in and check those boxes. If there's anything that you want excluded, you would go ahead and fill that in and check those boxes too. Perhaps there's a stove insert for the fireplace, or an above ground pool, or a hot tub doesn't work, or a shed that's half falling down. You can exclude those items, and I would suggest you do so and check those boxes and fill that in. All right. Section Q, your allocation of costs. Who's paying for what? So line item Q1, it talks about your natural hazard zone disclosure report, including the tax information. And then you're going to check who's paying for it. And we're seeing a lot of agents now that want it to be split so that both parties are going to contribute equally. And the cost is split equally if you check both, unless you agree that the seller is going to pay for 3/4 and the buyer is going to pay for 1/4 of it. I don't know why you want to split hairs with that, but those options are there, and you can fill that in the lines if you need to. And then your additional terms, what part of the natural hazard disclosure are you looking to have included? Environmental reports, other reports, check and fill it in. And then if you want to check the box and choose a provider of the natural hazard zone disclosure report, you go ahead and fill in that line there. Lines Q2 and Q3 are for any other report that you feel might be necessary to include in your initial purchase offer. Could be a roof report, could be a pool report, could be a termite report, whatever. And then who is going to pay for it? So maybe you're going to have your buyer pay for it. You just want to let them know you're doing one, or you want the seller to pay, or you want to split it. Q4 talks about smoke alarms, carbon monoxide detectors, and your water heater straps. Generally speaking, we expect our sellers to take care of that, but you can go ahead and choose who's going to pay for it if it's different. Government required point of sale inspections or reports, and government required point of sale corrective or remedial actions. So if you need a sewer lateral inspection, you can go ahead and put that here. If you're in Oakley or Richmond or anywhere else they're requiring that. And if any actual work needs to be done, then you could go ahead and do that on Q6 and decide who's going to pay for it. So maybe you as a buyer are willing to pay for the sewer lateral inspection in Oakley, but if it needs work, then you're going to ask the seller to pay for it. So you would allocate your costs on each line appropriately in your offer. Q7 are your escrow fees. And who's paying the escrow fees? Buyer, seller? Are you splitting it 50-50? Or are you each paying your own? And then on the right there, you will choose your preferred escrow holder. Up here in Northern California, the title companies, escrow holders are generally the same. Not always, but generally. Q8 is your owner's title insurance policy. Who's paying for that? And then the title company, in case you have different escrow holder. In Southern California, you find that a lot more often, different escrow companies from the title companies. Up here in Northern California, they exist, but they're pretty rare to have them separate. In Q9, the buyer's lender title insurance policy is paid for by the buyer. Okay, you could negotiate in separate terms elsewhere if you really felt that's something you wanted to write in your offer, but it's written like this because that's the majority of the way it's going. So, of course, we all know anything is negotiable. So, Q10, your county transfer taxes and fees. Every county has customary who's paying, but you get to choose right there by filling in the appropriate box. There's not very many cities around here that have city transfer tax and fees. However, if you're writing an offer for that city that does have it, you're going to choose who's paying those city transfer fees. The HOA fee for preparing the disclosures, since they're a seller required disclosure, seller's paying for those. And the certification fee for the HOA, the buyer's paying for that. And 14, the HOA transfer fees. So you can pick and choose who's going to pay the transfer fees, or you can try to split them. Then it states, unless otherwise agreed, the seller shall pay for a separate HOA move-out fee, and buyers shall pay for a separate move-in fee. And that only applies if it's separately billed or itemized, okay? And then we don't see a lot of that here either, but Q15 talks about private transfer fees. Generally speaking, those are paid for by the seller. But if you happen to be purchasing a property that has private transfer fees, you could say the buyer's willing to pay it or you want to split it. 16 and 17, if you have any other fees or costs that's for something that's going to come up, you can go ahead and fill in whatever that appropriate fee or cost would be, and then designate who's going to pay for it. And this is a really important section, not only for your clients, but for the title company, escrow holder. When they go to prepare everything, they're going to go right back to the contract and look at who is paying for what. It really makes it much more simple for them, since a lot of times they're ordering homeowner association documents and things like that. If all of that is just written out very clearly and spelled out in the contract, they don't have to guess or try to track you down or try to push to get the money in a certain timeline. It's all in your contract. Q18 is your home warranty plan. So if you are going to purchase extra home warranty coverage than a standard plan, like for me, I have saltwater pool coverage and all these other extra coverages, you could go ahead and write that in those lines there, that you want more than just the standard. And then who's going to pay for this home warranty plan? Is it buyer, seller? Are you splitting it? Or is your buyer waiving the purchase of a home warranty plan with their initial offer? And then the cost not to exceed, and then who your home warranty provider that you're requesting to provide that contract is right there. You'd fill that in. We all know that if the buyer waives it with their initial offer, it doesn't stop them from buying one later in the transaction. So, and then section R gives you some lines there for you to negotiate other terms. As I said earlier, everything in the contract is negotiable. So if you want to try to negotiate something else, you can go ahead and do that. If those 3 lines are not sufficient, again, it's going to go ahead and bring up the text overflow addendum and bring all of your extra text into that document so that you can have that. Okay, any questions?
I think we've got one from Jessica Enos. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, Jessica.
Yes, I put it in the chat because I didn't want to forget it as we went through the rest of this page. But on section P, in regards to the wall mounted brackets, in the previous RPA, there was also a section where you could specify who was going to repair any of the holes that were left. I know it was more geared toward the wall mounted brackets, but I think people also used it for nail holes and things like that. So is that, and you checked the box, a yes or no, is that no longer in there, or is it considered, if you're going to remove them, that the seller is going to repair them, or do we need to put that, specify that?
So what I'm going to direct you to is, as it says, paragraph 9 tells you more information about that section of items that are included and excluded. So I'm going to bring you here to the screen to section 9. So right here, it's going to go ahead and talk about all of that. And if this section doesn't address, like right here, unless otherwise specified in 3P1, brackets attached to walls, floors, or ceilings for any such component, furniture, or item will be removed, and holes or other damage shall be repaired but not painted.
So that's different, because remember, you used to check it or uncheck it, how
Right.
you wanted the seller to handle it.
Right. So
Okay.
that's what is in the contract. If that doesn't meet your needs, then you would go ahead and put that in an extra terms or an addendum. So that's why
Okay.
it's really important to use the cross-reference, whatever section you're checking boxes for, then to go back to this more in-depth section here and make sure you go over it very clearly with your clients and make sure that whatever their needs are addressed in this text. And if they're not, then go ahead and do an addendum or other terms or wherever you want to put that in the contract.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Cool.
James, I have a quick
Yeah.
question for you.
Yes.
Andy Perry, thank you. Number 7 and number 8 for the title and escrow, or the escrow and the title insurance. We've actually gotten a lot of calls, primarily new agents. And I know there's been always a disconnect with the title industry versus car, and they've been trying to work with them on that. Because we're in Northern California and title and escrow is really considered like one lump fee together, right? We do title and escrow jointly, right? But it has it separated. I'm thinking that's because of Southern California. I don't know. But a lot of people seem to get confused by that. And they've been going to their brokers, asking them about it. How different is this from the old contract? I wonder.
It's just, what's the right word? It's really delineating it very clearly. And it is, you're right, mostly for Southern California. As any of you who have visited or seen or done business in Southern California, these escrow companies are completely separate from who issues the title. I mean, completely separate entities. So it's definitely outlining that. For us here in Northern California, you're right, it blurs the lines because most are handled by the same company.
Yeah, they show it separate in the fact that, and then they question the fees, and it's just the title escrow for when people ask us, it's one lump sum fee, right? So yeah,
Right.
I do know that escrow advisory has been talking to CAR about that because there is a disconnect on that. So a lot of people get confused.
Yeah, and they're going to do another update, not a change, but an update to the contract again later this year based on the feedback. And when this comes up in those policies, the reality is the majority of the population, and so the majority of the agents are in Southern California. So when we kind of push back as Northern Californians, we're always outnumbered because the majority of transactions and agents and people are in Southern California. So,
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Good questions. Good questions.
And then it looks like we have one more from Kemi. Kemi, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, my question is, what would you put in R section for other terms? I'm just curious about it. I don't know what else.
And any other terms you want to negotiate. So for example, what Jessica brought up, if there's something about brackets and repairs or anything like that you want to negotiate that's not the text included in the contract doesn't meet your client's needs or desires, you would go ahead and rewrite other terms that you want negotiated into your contract in this section.
Okay.
All right, so it could be anything. I mean, it could be brackets. It could be something that it's whatever the contract in the boxes and these sections doesn't necessarily provide for you clearly, or you want to definitely be more explicit.
Okay.
You don't want any gray areas or misinterpretations.
Okay, so that means the contract answers the thought of cleaning up, making the place clean, ready for the buyer.
So if you want to write in there that the seller hires a professional cleaner upon vacant, you could write that in there. I mean, you can put anything you want in there, and then again, it's up to the sellers if they're going to agree to it.
Okay.
Yeah, and if those 3 lines aren't enough, if you really want to go for the gold, you're going to get that text overflow addendum, so you can write till your heart's content. All right. So that ends our grid right there. And then if you come on to the next page here, it's going to go ahead and talk about different addenda that may apply to your contract, and it's going to bring those forms into your contract. So previously we had probate purchase agreements and manufactured home purchase agreements, and we don't. We have one purchase agreement, and then we have addenda, which is multiples of addendum, that can be brought into the contract to add more clarity to your contract and be more specific. All right. So I encourage you, take a look at your new probate or manufactured homes or any of these other addenda, familiarize yourself with them. If you're a broker or manager still has questions, you can contact us at the association, or you can also call CAR Legal. They have extra people working this year because of the new contract. And And so there's definitely staff available for you to get your questions asked by a lawyer if you feel you really need to do that as well. And it's a free member benefit. I encourage you, when you need to use it, please do. And for those of you who are brokers, or those you're going to go to your broker, just so you know, on CAR Legal, brokers have priority and get their calls answered over the regular agent. So if you're, keep that in mind too. If you have other addenda that might be subject to this agreement, you can go ahead, and if you're going to add an addendum, you've got backup offers, septic, well. If you're going to do a 1031 exchange, God forbid we see another short sale anytime soon, or if you need court confirmation with your probate, those different addenda are there as well. You can check the box. The buyer and seller advisories, all the different advisories are there. Some of them are already checked for you, and they're going to be brought into your transaction regardless. And that's your buyer's inspection, your wire fraud, your fair housing and discrimination, and your California Consumer and Privacy Act advisories, okay? Those are automatically in your transaction. If you need to have a wildfire disaster, property and trust, bank owned, statewide buyer seller, short sale, probate, or any other advisory, you go ahead and check those boxes. And again, if unless it's a fill in the blank, it's going to go ahead and bring those into your transaction. All right. And then as we move on here, you're going to go ahead and just see the sections that are referenced in the negotiated terms box, giving you more information clearly, explicitly stated about those sections that you are filling in the box. So for example, here's your all cash offer right here in the middle of the page I'm showing you, and it gives you just more in-depth text about an all cash offer. So again, even though you're going to fill in the box on the first 3 pages, and I know most you're going to then go ahead and have your client sign it, encourage you to go through these sections that apply and make sure that everyone really understands them, not only because the language may not be as it was before, but you just need to make sure that you understand it, your client understand it, and everyone's on the same page. You will see a lot of bold lettering. For example, in section C here, you see unless, unless, unless. So make sure you're reading the full sections. And do we have any more questions right now from anyone out there? Like you say, I'm not going to go through every single line item of the rest of this because the majority is the same. There are differences, but they just moved it around in the contract. So it's at the end, so that when you're looking at these contracts as a listing agent, in the first 3 pages, you can get the majority of what you need to know for your clients. All right. If we have no other questions, I will stick around for a few more minutes in case something pops into your head. But again, the association did record this today. So if you feel you would like to watch it again, go ahead and contact the staff. And when it's ready, when Zoom is ready with it, they'll go ahead and send you a link to it. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call. Staff, could you put my cell number in the chat for me, please? And I'm happy to answer questions anytime, or you can contact the association and they'll send a message to me. But above all else, I'm just a trainer. So if there's something that you really have questions on and you feel that you didn't get answered properly here, talk to your broker or manager or call CAR Legal. You can get a lawyer on the phone who will give you the absolute legal answer that you're looking for. Our goal is to keep you out of court. So, okay. I'll check the chat box one more time. I think we're good. All right, well, I'll stick around just for a couple more minutes just in case. Otherwise, thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you, James. Awesome.
All right, have a great day, everybody. Go sell some houses.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, James.
Thank you all.
Hello, James. Are you done?
I'm doing fine. Well, doing fine.
How are you, James? Oh, are you finished or you're just?
Oh yeah, we're finished. Everyone's logging off.
Oh boy. Hey,
But
you have a
They did record it, so if you would like to see a copy of it, go ahead and contact the association, and when the video is ready, they can send you a link and you can view it.
Oh man, you're so much. That's good. That's great.
All right.
How's everything, James? How's everything?
Everything's great. Everything's great. Thank you.
Haven't seen you in a while, but thank you so much.
You got it.
Within how long you think that the video might be ready? Man, I missed it.
In a day or two.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll send out everybody that registered. I'll send out the link to everyone, and then it'll be on the Delta News Views on Monday as well.
Okay. All right. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, staff. We can go ahead and end the
James,
meeting
you
now.
know what? Remind me of you. You know,
What?
I got a hawk on my patio, on my backyard. There's a hawk on my backyard.
And
I
that
think
reminds you of me, huh?
Yeah.
I'll take that as a compliment.
What is the compliment? Come on, what you talking about? Is this your home? Is that your home?
No, that is just a background.
Oh my gosh, you got me going there. You're definitely a realtor. All right.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you later.
Take care, James. Bye-bye.
All right.
All right, thanks,
All right.
James.
Thank you, staff.
All right, have a good one.
You too.